In the opening scene, we see the protagonist Chloe Grange working when she gets a call from her father. He asks her to come back home so he can share some news with her, but unfortunately she's unable to, since she has a lot of work to do. Nevertheless, her father asks her to call him after work. Maggie, the owner and head chef, calls Chloe to the kitchen so she can help her with two things. First, they try the sauce for Valentine's Day, but the great news comes after that. Maggie reveals that she bought the restaurant across the street and asks Chloe to be the general manager. All Chloe wants by her own place, but she still hasn't got there yet. Letting Maggie know about her wish, she gets a week off work to think about the offer. We're taken to New York for a business meeting at Stratosphere Beverages, where they discuss potentially buying Grange Winery. Their boss Taylor asks for volunteers, and only one person agrees to do it, Seth Anderson. She tries to get him a partner, but he assures her that he doesn't need anyone else. Before she lets him go, she warns him about the difficulties, and even promises to make him the vice president of the company if he gets the deal. Full of confidence, he promises to be back in 2 days with the job done. The following morning, Chloe travels to her hometown, where she stops by the winery first. Hearing a familiar voice, she stops in her tracks, only to see her old friend Leanne guiding a group of visitors through the vineyards and the winery. Once she spots her, they embrace each other in a hug, and the young lady introduces Chloe as the daughter of the owner. Letting the group go to the wine tasting, the old friends catch up on the long time they haven't seen each other. Leanne reveals that she has been promoted to the manager of the winery, and Chloe couldn't be happier. She suggests they go to the cabin, since they haven't been there in so long. Even though Chloe gets saddened, as she hasn't been there since her mother passed, she decides to go along. As they get to the cabin, Chloe can't help but reminisce about the time she and her mother used to spend there. To make her feel better, Leanne reveals that her father put the cabin up for rental because of Valentine's Festival, and despite it being rustic, someone reserved it. Chloe is fine with the idea of having someone stay there, as she feels that it would be good for the house. As she tries to open the drawer, the handle stays in her hand, which only adds one more thing to the list of things that need to be fixed. Instead of living without a warning, Chloe decides to write an apology on the small chalkboard in the kitchen, as well as promise that everything will be fixed eventually. Arriving at her home, she is greeted by her father, who is excited to see her there. Chloe wants to find out what is so important, but he asks her to be patient until dinner. Later in the evening, we see the whole family gathered together, as Chloe's father Truman honors his late wife with her tradition of having dinner to kick the week off before the festival. He raises a glass to his wife Linda and his daughter Chloe. Assuming it is the best moment to let them know the truth, he sits down and reveals that the festival will be his last, as it is his time to retire and give the winery up. Everyone is curious as to why, but he asks them to just enjoy dinner, as there's plenty of time for that conversation to be held. Chloe doesn't hold it off long though. After dinner, she asks her father everything, and he reveals that it was her mother's idea for him to retire. Even though he tries changing the subject, he reveals that he plans to sell the winery, and that he's even scheduled a meeting. Chloe is vividly disappointed once she finds out that her father has scheduled a meeting with Stratosphere, which is a boxed wine company. However, there's no turning back, as we see Seth already in the area, trying to find his accommodation. Feeling starved, he heads to the only store open, which is where he meets Chloe. He sees her struggling to reach the popcorn on the top shelf, so he decides to help her with it. She reveals that she's stress snacking, but he admits to being hungry. To cure his hunger, she suggests he gets popcorn and chocolate, which is surprisingly what they say at the same time. Their conversation is cut short due to the lights going off, but both of them seem to be surprised at the similarity between them. The following morning, we see Leanne and her husband packing up some wine orders when Chloe appears. Leanne initially tries to stop her from going inside the winery, but soon, she is forced to reveal that the buyer has come to look around. Surprised to hear that he has come so soon, she decides to go inside and meet him. She approaches her father when Seth comes up. Both of them are surprised to see each other, and can't make up their mind whether they know each other or not. Moving on from the topic, Seth reveals Truman told him about Chloe trying to persuade him away from people like him. Chloe gets pissed off by his comments and reads him like a book, being right about everything. He acts arrogantly, and Chloe ends up storming off in a huff. Leanne waits for her outside the door, and once Chloe comes out, she can't help but gush over how handsome Seth is. However, that isn't the case for Chloe, as she only sees him as an enemy. Changing the subject, Leanne lets her know that she received an email from the guy who's staying at the cabin, complaining about the things that need to be repaired. Chloe decides to fix the problem herself, so heads down to the cabin. After knocking for a while, she decides to let herself in. But there's nobody there. Immediately, she notices the different writing on the board, so she gets closer to see it. The guy staying there, or as he calls himself, the handyman, reveals that he has fixed some stuff that needed to be fixed. So to return the favor, Chloe goes to the store to buy him some sweets and proper tools. She stacks them in the cupboard, but as she's closing it, the door of the cupboard falls off. Knowing that she won't be able to fix it, she decides to write on the board once again. Later in the evening, Seth returns to the cabin. On the phone, he lets Taylor know that Chloe is being hard on him, but promises to make the sale in the end. As he enters the cabin, he notices the cupboard broken, and once he opens it, he finds his favorite sweets. Looking to the side, he sees the box of tools and chuckles to himself. Finally, he spots the different writing on the board, and Chloe has written that he is her hero, and at the end referring to herself as in need of repairs. Returning home, Chloe heads to her father's office, and they talk about her work. She admits to feeling unsatisfied and to feeling like there's something else for her to do. Despite being confused, she opens up the old picture book she found, and they go through their first Grange festival. Feeling inspired, she asks her father to let her take over the festival and make it similar to the first one. Luckily for her, he lets her do it. Tossing and turning late at night, Seth finds it hard to fall asleep, so he gets up to find something to entertain himself with. Opening the cupboard, the fixed door falls off once again, giving him some entertainment for the night. In the morning, he heads to the winery with a bear claw in his hand to make it up to Chloe. However, she's not happy to see him there, as she reminds him of the true meaning behind the farm's legacy. However, he asks her not to judge him too soon, and proceeds to name the trees standing in front of them. She assumes that he got his information off the internet, but he lets her know that he grew up with divorced parents. While his mother lived in the city, he was happy to go camping in the countryside with his dad. Feeling sorry for him, she takes the bear claw, but instructs him not to follow her. Getting inside, she sits next to Leanne. Unfortunately for her, he ends up following her there, with 2 coffees in his hands for them to try. He proceeds to show them a work plan at the bar. It's a plan full of great ideas that will not only boost up the sale, but the salary of the employees. Seth promises her that they can continue working the way that they did before. He gets a call from his boss, concerned about his progress, but he assures her that he'll get the deal. Looking out in the distance, he sees the workers picking grapes and gets the best idea. Returning to the winery, Chloe is surprised to see Seth picking the grapes with the workers, so she decides to approach him. He claims that he's getting to know the business from the ground up, but as he tries a grape, the bitterness gets to him, making him realize that there's a lot more he needs to know. He gets back to the picking, and Chloe goes inside to paint the sign. After some time, she checks on the workers and the delivery process, and she sees Seth helping there. As if that isn't already enough, she spots him with her dad on his tractor working together, and that is when he has crossed the line. She thinks that he's not trying to get the deal anymore, but to drive her crazy, but Leanne doesn't agree with that. Chloe knows that the right thing is to sell, since nobody else would want to buy it, but admits to feeling like there's something sketchy about the whole deal. 3 ladies approach the bar and look for the right bottle of wine. Being the expert in that field, Chloe steps up and handles their wine in the best possible way, which impresses the ladies. Both her dad and Leanne are impressed, but Leanne is the one to ask whether she'd ever considered taking over the winery. While it feels great to work with wine, Chloe reveals that her father always pushed her to get out of town and find love. Leanne, though, thinks that her love might be in her hometown. Getting a text from her husband, Leanne decides to hang out with him, so Chloe takes the chance to fix the sink in the cabin. The plumber starts working on the sink when she notices the newly written message on the board. Handyman left a note saying that there's something comforting about a squeaky house, knowing that you're never alone, and Chloe couldn't agree more. The plumber snaps her out of it to let her know that he'll be finished in no time, since there's no significant damage. As he fixes the sink, he pulls out an old clock. Looking at it with a smile, Chloe reveals that it's a watch her mother bought her when she was a kid. As the plumber leaves, Chloe writes another note for the guest, not knowing that it's Seth. Seth, on the other hand, decides to enjoy his evening with a well-cooked dinner as he sits down at one of the diners. Upon ordering, he tries to get a healthier version of the meal, but the waitress doesn't let him, and as far as his drink goes, he has no other choice but to drink wine. As Truman's packing up the glasses, Chloe joins him by the bar. He asks her about her trips to the cabin, and she reveals that the handyman had been extra chatty that day. It was her mother's happy place. He is sure that she'll find someone that will love her the way he loved her mother. He lets her know that Seth will be joining her the following day for work, and she isn't fond of the idea. However, he assures her that he's not making the decision lightly, and asks for some understanding. After enjoying his dinner, Seth thanks the waitress for her service, who has become his friend by now, and heads to the cabin. Entering the cabin, he notices a new note on the board, as well as the old clock. In need of repairs, asks him to fix the clock so it can cuckoo once again, and he gets right to it, not knowing that it's Chloe's old clock. The following morning, Seth tries to help her with the packaging, but she asks him to stay out of her business as she's delivering to her loyal customers. On their way to the first delivery, he asks if GFW always hand delivers, and she doesn't like the sound of that. She asks him to never say that again, but he repeats it multiple times, just to annoy her. To answer his question, she lets him know that hand deliveries are done so a personal relationship is established with the buyers, something like customer service. Getting to their first stop, he tries to help her with the packaging, but she asks him not to interfere, as she's known the customer for a long time, and not to say a word. Kelly, the owner, is surprised to see Chloe there, and thanks her for the delivery, but she can't help but notice Seth. However, Chloe doesn't give him the chance to talk, as she lets Kelly know that he is an exchange Finnish student that doesn't know English. To her surprise, Seth mouths a couple of Finnish words, while handing Kelly a rose. Chloe reveals afterwards that she didn't know that he spoke Finnish. However, he admits that he doesn't. But it worked for him, since Kelly doesn't either. Chloe struggles to find the next delivery as she reads through the pages of her book. It is bizarre to Seth that she's not using a smartphone, but she reveals that she has her system. Finally finding the delivery, she gets out of the truck with the box in her hand nervously. The customer inside is someone who's never bought from them, but has asked for a meeting now, so she asks him to stay outside while she takes care of business. For starters, Chloe introduces a complex mix that she thinks will be suitable for the gentleman's restaurant. As he's about to comment on the wine, Seth comes out of nowhere with a fake accent, asking whether what they're drinking is the Grange blend. With his fake accent, he proceeds to lie about the wine being at private testing in France, and when the gentleman says that he'd been to the testing in France, and the wine wasn't there, Seth lies about it only being available for the exclusives. He introduces himself as a collector of good wines, which intrigues the gentleman. Chloe suggests he tries the wine once more and breathes it in to get the complex flavor, and due to the things that Seth told him, the gentleman agrees to sell the wine in his restaurant. Seth tries to buy the wine from her, but the gentleman chimes in and buys all of what Chloe had left from the deliveries. After finishing with the owner, Chloe heads outside, where Seth waits for her by the truck. As they get in, she can't resist hugging him as she thanks him for his support. They park by the beach and watch the sunset while enjoying some delicious food. However, there's only one question on Chloe's mind. She can't seem to figure out who Seth is. He comments that it's because their relationship has been purely professional. Of course, they don't really know each other. Seth struggles to find the right words to describe the wine taste. Chloe starts laughing and mocks him, and he bites back playfully, joining her mirth. He lets her know that she might be Truman's daughter, but there's something else to her. Looking at the beauty in front of him, he can't help but wish he lived in the town. Being the kid that grew up in concrete parks, he finds such sights to be perfect. Unfortunately, his father passed when he was 15, which stopped him from going to the countryside and made him focus on work. They have a discussion about their passions at work and the idea of legacies, and Seth realizes that Chloe thinks he's there to steal her father's history. After that, they decide to leave, but the atmosphere isn't the same as before. He tries to reach out to her before they part ways, but she's wary of him again and rejects his friendly approach. Entering the cabin, she sees that the handyman has already started on the clock, and that he left her a note reminding her that her bill is racking up. Leaving him a bottle of their wine, she asks if his handyman experience comes with advice on how to deal with jerks. Chuckling to himself, he advises her not to fight back, but to smile, since a jerk is only a jerk if you let them get to you. It brings a smile to Chloe's face as she reads his positive advice. The following morning, Truman tries to get some advice from his daughter for the wine selection at the festival, but Seth keeps on interfering. Instead of arguing, she takes the advice from the handyman and smiles hard in agreement with Seth. Later in the evening, she writes to let the handyman know that she smiled until her cheeks started hurting. As they're making the table for dinner, Leanne can't help but notice that Chloe's been giddy. However, when she asks her, Chloe can't help but blush. Chloe reveals the story of the handyman and their flirty notes to each other. They don't know who he is, but Leanne has a strong feeling that it's Seth. She doesn't voice this to Chloe. To settle the question, they try searching for him in the visitor log the following morning, but only 2 initials come out, TS. Seeing a number by the visitor's name, they feel lucky, but once they call, a girl's voice can be heard on the other line, making them panic and hang up. They wonder if it's his girlfriend or wife, or maybe if he has an assistant. But they know one thing, there's only one way to find out. Knocking on the cabin's door, she enters once again and sees no one there, so she decides to leave the note that will change everything. In the note, she asks him to meet her at the restaurant at 2, and to look for someone who's drinking the Grange Cab Franc. Panicking, she lets Leanne know what she's done the following morning, claiming that her crush isn't for nothing, and it's finally time they meet. Despite being nervous, Chloe decides to go meet the man. However, seeing Seth there at the same time surprises her, and neither of them thinks about the other being the potential anonymous date. They get inside and sit at separate tables, and it is only when Chloe orders the Grange Cab Franc that Seth realizes she's the mystery girl. Smiling to himself, he gets up from his seat and sits at her table, despite her protesting. He teases her about waiting for someone and the pair flirt a little. He even calls her beautiful, but she takes it as a jab rather than a compliment. He continues asking who the person is, so she reveals the whole flirting with the handyman, only to shut him up. He pretends not to know what she's talking about, and even asks some additional questions. Chloe is disappointed that her date seems to have stood her up, but Seth redirects her attention to the man she's actually sitting with, and by the end of the lunch, she's warmed up to him considerably. As she's preparing the booth at the festival, she gets approached by Leanne, who is shocked to find out that the mystery man didn't come. But once she hears about Seth, she assumes that there's something there. Seth is still giving updates to his boss, who is harrying him to get it closed soon. On the other side of town, Chloe takes her father to see the new booth. Opening his eyes, he can't believe the beauty in front of him, as old family pictures are displayed around the booth, as well as their family wine. However, the good news comes later in the evening, as Chloe's boss calls to let her know that she could become her partner in the new restaurant. It gets Chloe thinking, but we can see Seth feeling the same, as he collects the papers for Truman to sign. The following morning, he goes to Truman to get the job done, but he takes him fishing first. Truman never decides before visiting the waters, but he's impressed by how good Seth is at fishing. He asks Seth to leave the papers by his desk, so he can sign them that evening. Truman reveals that he knew that he was a deal breaker from the start. He just wanted him to have some fun. Seth arrives at their booth later, and they're happy to see him there. Getting an idea, Leon suggests Chloe give Seth a tour. Chloe remembers the wine tasting competition, so they head to sign their names and join. As the rounds come and go, Chloe and Seth seem to be enjoying each other's company, and end up winning the contest as they celebrate with a big hug. Chloe spots Truman and calls him over to celebrate. Confused, he asks her whether Seth told her, but she lets him know that they've won the contest. Curious, she questions her father's words, and he reluctantly admits he's sold the winery. Hannah pleads with him to change his mind, offering to buy it herself, as the short visit home has made her realize how much she wants to come back and make a success of their family business. However, it's too late. Truman has already signed it away. Tears fill her eyes as he tells her the devastating news. Unaware of the situation, Seth approaches them to give them some coffee, but ends up terribly for him as Chloe walks off. Back at home, Chloe calls her boss to let her know that she won't be taking the job. Truman questions her decision, but Chloe is resolute and knows what she wants now. It's a shame that the realization came too late. Not able to hold it in anymore, she breaks down in her father's arms. She heads to the cabin, where she sees the fixed clock on the wall. That brings a smile to her face. However, her sight falls on the ripped-up papers covered in wine. As she reads them, she finally realizes that Seth was the handyman the whole time. Leon calls, letting her know that she's at the cafe, and that the handyman is there with her. Chloe asks her to keep him there no matter what, as she rushes to arrive in time. Right as she parks, Seth walks out of the cafe, and she lets him know that he had forgotten something, as she flaunts the papers in the air. He reveals that he left them purposefully, and that his purpose had become her passion, her drive. She inspired him to become a better person and do something more fulfilling. Surprisingly, he asks her not to sell the winery to Stratosphere, but to run it herself. After asking her what she wants, she lets him know that only a handyman would know the answer to that question, looking at him flirtatiously. Getting the hint, he leans in closer, and they share their first kiss. Before they lean in for another one, she reveals that she was secretly hoping it would be Seth all along.